All right, today we're going to dive into Hernan Diaz's amazing Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, Trust. Now think of this book less like a straight story and more like a puzzle box. It's built from four totally conflicting accounts, all circling one giant Wall Street fortune. So what's the real story?
The whole book really boils down to this one question. It's all about power. If you have more money than you could ever imagine, how do you make sure the history books tell your version of events? Well, the easy answer is you just write it yourself, right? But that's where this book is so clever. That's just the starting point, the first layer of the onion. We are about to peel back four different versions of the truth, and you'll see how each one completely flips the last one on its head. So let's start with layer one, the public version of the story. This is the one that everyone out there thinks they know, all thanks to a very popular, very scandalous book. The first thing we read is a novel from the 1930s called Bonds, and this thing was a smash hit. It's one of those tell-all books where the names are changed, but everybody knows it's the inside scoop on this incredibly private and powerful financier, Andrew Bevell, and his wife. In this fictional novel, we meet Benjamin and Helen Rask. He's a cold, distant genius, almost like a machine built to make money. She's painted as this brilliant, captivating woman who is also incredibly fragile and whose mind eventually just collapses. This is the myth that gets created, and it sets the stage for everything that follows. Now, as you can imagine, the real man at the center of this story was not exactly thrilled. So that brings us to the second layer of our puzzle, the official story, straight from the source. The real financier, Andrew Bevell, is absolutely livid about Bonds. He feels it's a disgusting caricature that ruins the memory of his late wife, Mildred. So what does he do? He decides to fight fiction with his own facts by commissioning an autobiography. And look at how he opens his book. This quote is his first move. He's basically saying, you all think you know who I am, but you have no idea. It's a classic power play. He's grabbing the microphone to take control of his own narrative. And this is how he corrects the story of his wife. That complex, troubled genius from the novel? She's gone. In her place, Bevell paints this picture of a perfect, quiet, simple woman, a devoted wife whose main interests were flower arranging and reading mystery books. The key thing here is he completely flattens her, erasing all of her complexity. But here's the thing about an autobiography. Someone actually has to write it. And the young woman Bevell hires to tell his story, well, she starts to notice that his perfect facade has some pretty serious cracks. Okay, so meet Ida Partenza. She's an ambitious young writer who gets hired as Bevell's ghostwriter. Decades later, she writes her own memoir, and that's the third document we get to read. And let me tell you, this is where Bevell's carefully crafted truth really begins to unravel. This quote just perfectly shows you how Bevell operates. He's not giving Ida facts. He's giving her instructions, a script. He keeps insisting on this simple creature narrative. But Ida, being a sharp writer, just has this nagging feeling that a huge piece of the story is missing. So, Ida starts digging on her own. And what she finds is mind-blowing. Mildred, the simple creature, wasn't just arranging flowers. She was a cultural powerhouse. She was funding libraries, sponsoring the most avant-garde composers of the era, running a massive, world-class philanthropic organization. Bevell didn't just downplay his wife's story, he completely erased her life's work. And this, of course, leads to the big question that drives us into the final, deepest layer of the puzzle. Why? Why would you do that? Why would you silence the legacy of the woman you claim you're trying to honor? And the answer, it turns out, is hidden in the final document, a fragmented diary, written in the last days of Mildred Bevell's life. The moment we read Mildred's own words, that simple creature image is just shattered into a million pieces. I mean, listen to this voice. This is a razor-sharp, analytical mind at work. Her thoughts are philosophical, they're deep, they're incisive. This is not the woman Bevell described. And then she drops the bombshell, the one truth that explains everything, the reason he had to erase her. Andrew Bevell didn't build the family fortune alone. In fact, he wasn't even the architect. She was. So let's put it side by side. Andrew Bevell's story is that his success came from some fuzzy, unerring intuition. But Mildred's diary reveals the truth. She was a mathematical genius who created a revolutionary model for market prediction. He was the one making the trades, sure, but she was the brilliant mind behind the entire strategy. He didn't just erase her hobbies, he stole her genius and called it his own. So wow, after peeling back all those layers, what are we actually left with? Let's just quickly recap this wild journey. We started with the public myth from the novel. That was answered by the self-serving autobiography. Then, that official story was torn apart by the skeptical ghostwriter. And finally, we get to the core, the buried truth from Mildred's own diary. And that's really the genius of this book. It's not just about who made the money. It's about who gets to tell the story. It shows us that history isn't always a fixed set of facts. It can be a narrative that is bought, shaped, and completely controlled by money and power. Which leaves us with this final chilling thought. Andrew Bevel used his immense fortune to try and write his wife out of her own story. So it makes you wonder, how many other brilliant people, how many other stories have been completely buried throughout history, simply because they weren't the ones holding the pen?